Well, this could be the latest facilities in an expensive boarding school, but it's not. It's actually the new women's prison that has opened recently in Stirling. No bars in the windows, etc. A new type of prison for women. Now, this new prison has a capacity of 100 inmates, whereas the previous one that it's replaced had a capacity of 430. How are they going to manage? Well, here's a graph of the female population in prison, and you can see a pretty dramatic drop. Look at the green line in particular, that's convicted prisoners. It dropped pretty sharply around 2020, and that was the mass release of prisoners during COVID. But there's been a general trend as well away from custodial sentences, particularly for women. So what we're seeing here is what was originally discussed and planned, proposed in the 2012 Commission for Women Offenders report. And it said things like this. The strategy is founded on the principle that all aspects of the care of women in custody should be designed for women and take account of their likely experience of trauma and adversities. All aspects of the approach will therefore be both gender-specific and trauma-informed. In other words, everything about the imprisonment of women, it needs to be specifically geared for women. Right. Was there a similar report about having prisons specifically geared for the needs of men? No, not at all. I mean, this is the way the Scottish Government operates. So trauma-informed and gender-specific. So according to the Scottish Government, would they be really keen on single-sex schools? I mean, women need a totally different approach in prison. Do girls need a totally different approach in schools? The Scottish Government would say, no, of course not. Boys and girls are the same. It's just socially constructed, the difference between the sexes. No, they should be exactly the same, treated the same. That's equality. Then when it comes to prison, they want women's prisons to be very, very different than men's prison. So let's read a bit more. The Director of Operations at the Prison Service has said, moving forward, the women's agenda and the women's strategy in Scotland and a real different model of how we manage women in Scotland. Smaller, more focused establishment which worked with women in a different way that allowed us to get underneath the real complex issues that women had who were coming into custody and to be able to break that cycle of offending. So a smaller, more focused establishment benefits women. Would that not benefit men as well? Would that not benefit any prisoner? One would have thought so. To really get underneath the complex issues. Is it just women that have complex issues? Do male prisoners not have complex issues? I would imagine that they do. To break the cycle of offending, is that what you're trying to do with all prisoners? Male prisoners and female prisoners? But this has been presented as if this is a specific thing that's needed for women. Now, there might be research that's backing this up, saying that this does benefit female prisoners. Has anyone bothered to do the research to find out if it benefits male prisoners in particular? Was there a strategy for male prisoners? No, of course, no one's interested in that at all. It's the Scottish Government. Should they be interested in that? Not necessarily. If they're doing things specifically for women, they should do things specifically for men. Or probably better, just try and look at the overall picture. Look at how different approaches work for different types of criminals, different types of personalities, etc. But the approach with the women is to take account of their likely experiences of trauma and adversities. Right, if you look at men in prison, how many of them experience trauma and adversities in their younger lives? You'd imagine a substantial number, wouldn't you? A substantial number. But no, that this is a women's issue to try and have a prison that deals with trauma and adversities. I mean, why? Why is that just something for women? Another aspect they look at is, say, women often have caring responsibilities. There might be, for example, a single mother. Well, not necessarily a single mother, a married mother. But in any case, so imprisoning a woman takes the woman away from her caring responsibilities, and that can be very damaging for children. Okay, fair point, absolutely fair point. But is that not the same for some men as well? But the Scottish Government's approach, it's a gendered issue. That's the feminist approach. That's their jargon. Everything has to be seen as a gendered issue. In other words, treat men and women differently. Surely, if a concern with the prison system is that people are being kept away from their young children, and that's damaging to the young children, then that issue is the same for women as it is for men. There will be single fathers as well, for example. But no, they want a gendered approach. So ultimately, you look at particular factors like parenthood, and then you don't think, okay, let's look at parenthood as a special consideration. You say more single parents are female, so therefore it's a women's issue. And it just doesn't help. It doesn't help. Right, in the justice system, it's been well known for a long time that generally women receive shorter sentences for similar crimes. Okay, just a couple of snippets here. 2015 UK Ministry of Justice study found that women were more likely than men to receive non-custodial sentences for the same crimes. For example, for theft-related offences, women were more likely to receive community orders, while men were more likely to be imprisoned. Now, there might be other factors in that. It might not just be straightforward discrimination, but imagine if that was the other way around. Can you imagine the outcry if it was actually women who got sent to prison more and for longer for basically the same sort of crime? That would be considered an outrage. There'd be emergency committees meeting in the Parliament to sort out this problem immediately. Another report, Sentencing Council reports, have shown that women typically receive shorter custodial sentences than men for the same categories of crime. Now, what we've got behind this approach to prison is basically a humanist sort of ideology. The idea that people are basically good, they need our support, and if someone's done something wrong, well, something's gone wrong in life. Something caused them to do that. So they need therapy to help them overcome the thing in their past that's caused them to behave badly. So the idea of free will, that some people choose to do things wrong. Everybody chooses to do things wrong. Some people choose to do things wrong that are very serious and illegal, and they get caught, and those people end up being punished for them. So on their philosophy, though, prison's about rehabilitation and therapy. It's not so much, if at all, about punishing people as they deserve on the basis of their wrongdoing. So that's the underlying philosophy, but then there's another philosophy that gets overlaid on that, and that's feminist ideology. Now, feminist philosophy in general, the message coming through, the assumption, the underlying feeling is basically that men are bad and women are good. Women are victims, men are aggressors, and that's the problem with society. So what the government needs to do is to sort out these bad men and support these poor women who are the victims. That's the sort of underlying feeling behind it. But then you've got women in prison. Well, that doesn't really fit the narrative, does it? Women are supposed to be good all the time. So how have they ended up in prison? Well, it must be because they must have had adverse circumstances. They must have faced trauma. So as women, obviously, there must be a reason why they've done things wrong. So we just need to find the reason that's caused these unfortunate women to behave badly, to break the law, and we can help them with that way, and then that will sort it out. The idea that you punish women, when surely it wasn't their fault. Women are basically good. So it's unfair to punish them just because they've been dealt a bad hand in life. So that's the way they are tending to think. So on that philosophy, they want to be on women's side. So when it comes to the justice system, do I want to be on women's side? I want to be on everyone's side. I want to be on the side of justice. I want to be on the side of rehabilitation. I want to be on the side of victims. And the actual criminals themselves, I want them to be given every chance to reform, etc. I'm sort of on their side too. But the one thing that doesn't come into it is whether a person's a man or a woman. But that's just me, and I'm not driven by this sort of feminist dogma that the Scottish government is driven by. So this new approach to women in prison, how's it going? It's only been going a few months. Here's a newspaper report why Britain's new £85 million women's super jail has got off to an awful start. Locals are being hounded by screaming, shouting, swearing and banging coming from the prison at all times of day and night. Right, that doesn't sound brilliant, does it? I would imagine, though, if you took the leaders of that prison, if the politicians were going to visit that prison, they wouldn't admit there was any sort of problem. They would say, it's going really well, and their main measure of it going really well is that the women prisoners are probably saying, well, some of them are saying, I've heard interviews, they're saying, oh, we actually really like it here. It's much better than that other prison we were in. So, this is a step in the right direction. We quite like it. And if the prisoners are saying we quite like it, well, that's probably what they take as the ultimate measure of success. But it sounds like behaviour is pretty out of control. Let's put it that way. So to conclude, I will read you a couple of relevant sections from the Scottish Family Party's policy in this area. So we say men and women should be equal before the law. Isn't it bizarre that we even have to say that? The Scottish Government policy of special treatment for female offenders must end. Prisons should induct inmates into an austere and formal environment from which they can, in the case of excellent behaviour, quickly progress to a more amenable regime of purposeful and transformative activity. I think that's really important. Prisons shouldn't be a pleasant, fun place unless you've shown that your behaviour is going to be excellent, your attitude is excellent, and you want to make the most of opportunities given to you. For that sort of person, a more relaxed atmosphere, okay, quite happy to consider that. But until that's shown, or if that's not shown, then prisons should be, say, a pretty austere and formal environment. Right, what else about prisons? Good quality education and training should be available to all prisoners. Prison work should have some focus on gaining new skills and qualifications. There should be an expectation that prisoners will engage with these opportunities. And the last thing, prison must be free of illegal drugs. Strong punitive measures should be taken against prisoners, visitors or staff who contravene this. I think it's a pretty sorry state of affairs, isn't it? When you've got a nation that can't even keep its prisons drug-free, for goodness sake. I mean, that's something where it's got to be a whatever it takes sort of approach. Whatever sort of searches and security measures are necessary, they need to be put in place to make prisons drug-free zones. The idea of someone going to prison and while in prison becoming a drug addict, I mean, you can't get much more of a dramatic failure of the prison system than that, can you? Right, hope that was interesting. Do get your tickets for the Scottish Family Party Conference. There's a link right below. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.